ain't going back. Not gonna buy into all that. Hey, hey, ain't gonna hide. Gonna let all the fears slide. Got Mother Nature is on my side. Got all of the loving growing inside.
And hello, everyone. Welcome to the New Now. I am delighted to be with all of you again today. We are going to continue our series of freedom action strategies. We've been discussing possible ways you can help yourself be free with many different, I would say, luminaries, if you like. I've been very lucky to be able to discuss uh, the potential new ways that you can be alive, happy, healthy, and free with some of the best of the best of the people that are working in their way out of the box and towards helping society at large, I would say, become better in every way. Today, we're talking with John Coleman. He's an educator,
Hey,
alternative, I would say, university level teacher of art, culture, and history. It's something that I've always had an interest in. When I went to the standard universities many years ago, I was disgusted pretty much with what got shoved at me as education, which was pretty much memory control of facts, whether they were true or not, really didn't make a difference to the teachers at the time. Now, I will let John introduce himself. He probably has a much more eloquent way of putting it than I. John, hello, and welcome to the New Now.
hey, Lorenzo, thanks for having me here. I was thinking you're pretty hard up for luminaries if you're coming after me, but I think we'll make a good go of it here. So, yes, my name is John Coleman, and I work at Apocatastasis, an institute for the humanities, and this is a school that I started 7 years ago, very shortly at the anniversary of that. So, good timing, Lorenzo, for that. Um, Very fortuitous there. And yeah, we specialize, myself and there's another scholar working with myself, Dr. Nirmal Das, and hope to get some other skins on board too to teach. Uh, you find out if you're teaching that Zoom and StreamYard and all those sorts, they kind of max out after about 3 people in the class. It's very difficult to keep a real kind of dynamic feel. So you find out these things that you weren't like, planning on. But anyway, yeah, we focus on the humanities and the Western humanities and try to keep what's good at modern pedagogy, and so we can maybe talk about that in our time ahead, but maybe weed out some of the less happy aspects of modern formal learning.
What is pedagogy? Maybe you can
Ah,
explain that a
good
little.
man. Pedagogy is teaching style or philosophy for teaching, and um, it goes back to, I think, originally Greek, but in Latin it's pedagogos. But a lot of Latin words are snatched from Greek, and I think the original one is basically like something akin to babysitter or something, or overseer of younger children. Um, just and that kind of lets you know about the type of upper class origins of modern or well of learning in general. You kind of limited to historically to the upper echelons, which is a problem. Maybe we can talk about that. A lot of alternatives are as well. So I want to keep an eye on that as we're in a very dynamic educational world and trying to make access very possible. But yeah, pedagogy, anyhow, Lorenzo, is one's approach, one's philosophy to education. It would include comportment in classroom, the way they present information, and really the ultimate raison d'etre of learning. And what is it for?
It's a good question. I mean, for myself, I found, as I was in school, the teacher, man or woman, delivering the class and the education, the facts was just as important as the information that was presented itself. I mean, as you said we were digging, for luminaries, and I found when I saw some of your interviews before we had a chance to meet. Simply put, you look like a man I wanted to talk with, right? I go, oh my goodness, because I haven't stopped educating myself since I left university. I think there's a big divergence, let's say, in the need and the desire for a human to understand and learn and to explore and to pick up ideas for themselves and how to be alive. And, the modern, so to speak, and I'll use the term very loosely, education system, which has left a lot of us, running for the hills. Um, Perhaps you can describe or let us know, like, how did you come to this current system, which you started 7 years ago, which is very interesting. From a background, I would assume as a teacher in other systems.
Oh yes, that's quite a question there. So you'll have to lasso me if we go on too much, but I'll make it manageable here, Lorenzo. When I was in undergrad, I was asked to teach geography for a very upstart school. It was just coming together in Connecticut, and this school was comprised. It was out of a Catholic parish there, and these were largely homeschooling families. And something that happens with homeschoolers, you'll inevitably find out, is as we've all found out this past year, is cabin fever, shall we say, and combined with by the time a student gets to high school, it's a bit of a big plate for a mother, especially with younger children and so forth, to worry about that, try to teach all these subjects and things. So a lot of these poor moms are ripping out their hair, and they wanted a school. So this is originally was a kind of a co-op thing. And that developed as the years went by. And in many regards, this community was quite laudable, and provided against, because of the stability of the families, was what's much more solid than would be found in the general public. There was a lot more sanity for a lot of reasons, I thought, and in many regards, they were the best case scenario. So I'm teaching here day to day, year after year, undergraduate goes its way, but I was also noticing as time was going along, a couple of things. One of which is that the parents or the students who were woke or red pilled, I don't know what pill am I supposed to say. They understand them. You know what I'm talking about. They got all sorts of pills now. They're red pilled, white pilled, blue pilled. I don't even know. But a lot of these people flattered themselves, and more than flattery, they had an observation of society, and they were commendably acting on it. And yet I noticed that there was still a lot of what I would say is junk ideas coming in from the pop culture as to what education is for, which was for them largely for a job, right? It was largely for just, if it was thought out that far, you see. And so that left the material, if you forgive me, the student being in general much more solid quality, but a lot of these ideas are floating around. So at the end of the day, all that mattered was the grade and the pressure to get the credential and whatnot.
But what age were you teaching at the time? I'm curious, like what age students?
In those days, I was a little bit younger. I was 19. I was 19 when I started, although I was teaching kind of student teaching even in high school. They had a type of thing for the seniors to teach the younger ones. But in terms of formally, I started at 19 and then just kept up at this school until 31 or 32.
What were your students at the time?
Yes. Initially, they would have been in junior high school.
Okay.
And this was a place that was very strapped for cash. / a lot of people were very cheap in Connecticut, as I've kind of meditated on things. I think it's a certain culture that's developed amongst the homeschoolers in Western Connecticut. The point is, though, what that offered me, Lorenzo, as you ask about the development of things, is actually a very delightful opportunity, which very few teachers have, which is to have multiple students over multiple years. And there is such a thing as looping, which is one of those occasional trends that comes into education where a teacher will stick with the class for 2 years. But I had some of these students from like 7th grade to 12th grade. So it's a whole other level in terms of presenting ideas and doubling back and inside references and not just on a social level, but also on, if you set something up about the Renaissance and, you're talking about World War II or whatever, you can make a background.
Fascinating.
And so the long story short is because of what I believe were the certain interpersonal failures in this community, and persistent ones, after a while, I kind of I felt I wanted to move on. And I remember when I told the priest, I can't do this anymore. I'm done. I think before the end of the day, he asked me to come back part-time for the next year or whatever. These people, then it's not like the people were beating on the door to teach at the place. They didn't pay anything. And there were all the regular headaches of things, which is a commentary on them, but also a commentary on American approaches to education, I think. People pay for what they value, and we can say a lot about American society in that, and that's as true in the public world as anywhere else. But anyway, it wasn't really a pay issue. It was a respect issue that I won't belabor your fine podcast with. But the point is, by 2013, 2014, I was moving in this direction. So ultimately, I had reached the point where I couldn't stay there anymore, but I also realized that these students were very likely going to be the best students I would ever come across. Even if I could go into public school or mainstream private school, I was kind of going in certain legal directions that would make that impossible. But even if I could swallow my pride, I knew I would never come up to that quality of student in terms of just as a community with the stability they had. And I noticed, okay, so, and they still were busted with some other ideas. So I said, the only other option, one option is to go into the man, right? But I'm not going to professionally have that access to that quality of students again. Likely, one, you'll have the oddball, but as a community. Okay, the second option is to leave the field, which most teachers do after about 5 years. I believe that's about the average.
Wow.
And then the third option is to make one's own learning space or school. And that was the route I took.
Right. I mean, that's an amazing way to look at it. I can't even imagine how helpful it would have been at the time to have the same teacher for 1 year after the next, because developing a personal relationship other than being thrown in and out of class, and having only, let's say, 10% of your answers or your questions, answered in any way that's helpful, beyond getting back thrown at you and then, next or being graded is definitely something that would have been useful in my personal education. I mean, if you don't mind me asking, why did you become an educator? Why do you like teaching? Why was that a vocation or something that, you've decided to not only pursue, but pursue through the challenges towards, I could say, the ultimate goal of having your own school?
Well, initially, it's not particularly grand. I suppose it got grander as such as is, as we got along. But initially I was just kind of filling in, or I was asked to do it. It was it was certainly a change for what I had been doing before then, and I was in the history field at that point, and followed through with that in terms of formal studies on my end. So I was like, hey, let's apply some of this. And as things went along, however, that's a really interesting question. I think on the side, I've always been interested in the news and current events and this sort of thing. Even in high school, I was in for that stuff. I was probably really, really a bore because I was, going on about this, that, or the other. While people were chasing other things, but in any case, so I already had this observational thing, but then I got into the truth community, the research community. This was something more concrete than I think it is these days, because there's been a lot of blending, but the conspiracy world and whatever, and you come to a deeper appreciation of things. And the more I began to meditate on things, the more I came to the conclusion over the years that a lot of this, not all of it, but a great deal of this is coming from pedagogical methods or ideas that are quiet or embryonic within learning. The people who are doing it, the teachers, the students, they may not be consciously even aware of this at any point, but there's a value system and so forth. And so as things went along, I have attached more of the solution to education I don't know if there was a eureka moment um, in that pedagogical development, Lorenzo, or specifically with the Apocatastasis. With the latter, it was, ideas that had been floating around, but it was, I can't stay here anymore, and the plans A and B are not going to work, so we just got to go ahead with plan C. And there wasn't much, like much of my life, there wasn't much planning there, but you kind of forge ahead.
So what do you mean by solution? You mean solution to a proper education for your students, solution to becoming an authentic teacher?
Thank you for that opportunity to clarify. A solution to the crises, or as far as I see it, I tend to see, these all sorts of problems as being a type of single front.
Mm.
And whether that is economics or politics or personal agency or faith or family and so forth, the various disorders that I saw across the board, I saw not completely explained by education by any means, but that could be very effectively addressed, because that, I think, is the great thing we're missing. Many people see this problem of it has many names, and it has many fronts, I guess. But one of the things I see people missing is any sort of real collective consciousness. At this hour, most people are just trying to keep their own personal sanity or raise their family. You very often hear this sort of talk in the homeschooling world, which is commendable, but for me, it's not the end of the story. And it's you can stay there for a little bit, but at a certain point, some more sophisticated work and social work must be pushed. So did I answer your question there? It's a great follow-up.
Yeah, I mean, solution. So you mean giving your students the ability for critical thinking, or helping them towards an understanding of what true education could mean in relation to just survival consciousness?
Thank you. Yes. What I mean is, this society in 1,000 ways does not encourage agency. That is to say, independent initiative. Although its PR men are very good at playing into that desire. In America, we have a great country music industry that is great at playing into that, mind you. And whilst the shadows on the wall are great, the reality is not there. And so I see education on the individual level as being a tremendous way to either inure people to be followers of all sorts, or to have agency in things. And that is where I see, and that gets yes, certainly a personal internal agency and control over their passions and whatnot, and then building out certainly to economic agency, to self-esteem and morale as a community, and also local consciousness for the individual, and then even for the local society. And that would be perhaps a different discussion to finesse that, but we have this monoculture that's being presented to us. And so I see education as a way to preserve culture, to grow culture individually and communally. But it can also very often be a means to destroy that, and it often is. And so that's my work, is to go against that.
It's interesting, because I do found, the one word that stuck with me in what you just mentioned was morality or integrity. How to be a leader, how to be a chooser, so to speak. And I found sorely lacking. I mean, I can recall one teacher in maybe the 30 or 40 I had. I went up to a couple years university before I had enough and left. There just was no morality coming from just about any of them. I could say respect. And I'm going to turn it back to the beginning of our conversation. Is I did watch you on Unslaved originally, And that was, I am a man of my own passions, let's say. And I said, well, that's a man I can respect. So I want to talk to him and I want to see more why he's doing what he's doing. And, for me, that's the base ground level for building, a teacher, let's say, or for anybody to give you any sort of education in life. If they're not standing on a firm ground of morality or integrity, what are they teaching you? I read somewhere not so long ago that, in the current education system, and let me know what you think, please, that people are taught to be choosers instead of creators. They say it starts at the beginning with multiple choice questions and, 1, 2, 3, or 4, or, this answer is right and this answer is wrong. But, they tell you they want to teach you to be an independent thinker or a creative thinker. But, from my experience anyways, I found that was stamped out of you at a very early age as to, going outside the box and maybe flying a lot further than was being offered in the system at the time.
Yes, that reminds me of the old Harry Chapin song, Flowers Are Red. Very much appropriate to this discussion. But yes, and that's a great example, Lorenzo, of the type of philosophy that I mentioned that can be contained in pedagogical practices, the Scantron or the bubble answer sheet. And that's saying something, exactly. That's saying something about knowledge, that there's only so many answers. And hey, if you can pay an SAT coach, you can find out the tricks of the system. It is a system, though. It's something that's imposed on knowledge.
Right. And so then
yes.
It's knowledge, really. It's something else then, right? It's like you said, you're being groomed to fit into a certain way of thinking instead of being groomed to become a thinker or a creator. And, I would like maybe to take a moment. Maybe you can, share with our viewers how your approach and what you're sharing in, your educational current, modality and what you're doing will allow people maybe to grow beyond what's being offered as the system. That was something, again, I was attracted to.
Yes. I think, well, one is you've alluded to it in general regarding modern pedagogy, but it's very much accentuated, and that is the personalism of education and how very often we need someone to learn with. Maybe not strictly speaking, there's a certain percentage that are autodidacts and so forth. I should say that was very influential in my early years. I got in touch with unschoolers. And that was quite refreshing. I've since developed certain critiques, but that was like, I don't know if it was a eureka moment, but it was certainly I'd never come across people like that before, and it was certainly something that encouraged me to both think outside of what was education or what I knew that to be, but also to scorn the system as well. So that was a good thing that came along there. But yes, I would say that personalism, as best as I and my colleague can offer that, that's appreciated, and something I'm quite shocked. But we have students enrolled in other programs, online stuff, and they don't see their teacher. The teacher's a keyboard on the other end. And this is happening much more because of this last year and whatnot. And that's of course a great fear of mine is the loss of that physicality in education. And that can come as soon from the system or the agenda and Mr. Gates and Zoom and all that, as it can come from the homeschool world. That's my fear is because, or the alt ed world, right? And you lump your unschoolers into that, where they're reacting against a very obnoxious system, and so they're just as inclined to say to hell with physical schools as the public schools or whatever. And the worst case scenario is everything just goes on Zoom, automatic pre-recorded Zoom classes or something. So physicality, towards your question, this is what we do for work. So there is for those who can, there's a tuition. But to not enter into the type of wheeler or dealer economic system which schools have gone in for, either we talk about morality, either the public system, which is dubious because of the ways the monies are raised. I would say not so much through taxation, but the fact that taxation, people are entered into the tax system through a lot of mendacity. Most people, who are citizens have no idea the system that they've been massaged into. So there's that. So what, on a, if you like, a spiritual aspect, I mean, what type of an education are you going to get when the money is being taken, not from theft? I wouldn't say taxation is theft, but rather from dishonesty because of not telling the people who are paying the taxes how to get in or out of that system. Again, that would involve a discussion on the legal system and legal corporate personhood. But then on the college end, you have a usury system, and it brings up the same questions of morality. If you have a system of theft and dishonesty, what type of an education are you going to get? And this is an unusual way for a lot of people to consider, but I think it's worth considering. So your first answer is that personalism. The second is a more just economic arrangement. Although it takes two to tango, the students have their obligation they must seek to meet and make a good effort for that. And then I would say that multi-year, your third and my third response to your question that you have is that that if the student wishes to do it, that long-term connection with the same teachers and with the same books and the same teaching styles. That doesn't mean necessarily the way I present things is the best way, but even a mediocre teacher over those years, there's going to be a marginal benefit, I argue, from that. That's going to come from, that will be better. A mediocre teacher over many years will be better than excellent teachers who are taken in bites semester to semester. It's better to have one mediocre teacher for 3 years, say, rather than 6 or 12 excellent teachers who are not communicating with each other.
It makes sense. It makes sense. I mean, I think, what do you think of the difference? Something that came to me is, I think, especially with the modern university system, where you have to invest so much money, right? Literally, up to your, if you're going to get any sort of a degree, hundreds of thousands in some of the so-called better schools. It seems to me you go in with a feeling of what you're going to get instead of what you're going to learn, right? Kind of like you're investing to get a job or get an education or get a wife or a husband, if that's what you're looking for in university, or get some fun instead of the beauty and the love, which is also less stressful. Just let's see what we're going to learn today. Like, let's see what I'm going to grow with today. Again, I'll turn it back to myself. I found that, I could memorize a whole bunch of facts, but school disgusted me, to be honest, the way it was, right? I was just horrible as an experience. And I was traumatized from day one for pretty much all my teachers, and not in the way that I was beat or hit or any of those crazy things, just simply by the fact that my imagination system was traumatized. I can recall off the top of my head 2 teachers which I loved, and both of them shared a passion for out of the box thinking, beyond, one was an economics teacher and one was a math teacher, right? And both of those were not anything I really loved so much, but due to the nature of who they were, I learned tons more of those topics in those classes in the short time I had them. And each was just for the 1 year, because I was in a typical public system in Canada. But they allowed me in both, and I have a clear image of their faces right now, to think in ways that were unique at the time to what was given to me from my parents or my friends or the TV or the ways that a lot of people tend to self-educate or educate themselves. What do you think about that? I would love to discuss, I guess, imagination and how your current classes, what you offer in relation to that, how that comes into play and what you feel about that.
Yes, towards the beginning part of your comment there, when I was a little bit younger, I knew a TA, like a room babysitter in college. We'll say he was like a senior, and the other, she was like in charge of the freshmen, and the freshman girls it was, and she told me this. She said, there's way more women in college looking for husbands than you'd imagine, and whether there's that natural desire, or the more stimulated desire of economics. Yes, we very often approach our education for what we can get, and it's in this regard, I would have a different tone of voice with the school administrators, particularly college ones. although I'm here in Western Connecticut, we have all sorts of prep schools that do this as well. But they deliberately advertise. They deliberately advertise in this neck of the wood, in this neck of the woods, and in this vein of motivation of what you can get. Right? I mean, they're very clear about that. You are investing in the upper middle class or something like that. They'll use this language. A college degree will get you X amount more per year over your life. I mean, completely mechanical understanding of things and rather dubious, I must say, like a lot of those type of statistics are. But anyhow, towards your point, Lorenzo, about imagination, one of the things I try to encourage, and hey, it's a tight ship at this hour, so I'm running around and we're and Nirmal's doing his bit, and the students are doing a good job too. But what as much as possible, I try to encourage quiet time. It's not just it's a very Western idea of pedagogy where the teacher has to be uh, clucking away for however many minutes, and you have to get so many semester hours. And as far as things go, I try to at least use that template for hours and courses and whatnot, just to make it intelligible to people coming from different backgrounds and whatnot. But definitely, I try to encourage in the schedule, especially if there are full-time students and things, the downtime or a lot of quiet time. So full-time enrollment, we might meet 3, maybe 4 days a week, but one of those days is going to be quiet time, that that time where the student can be with the text or be with their essay or whatnot. So towards that imagination, I think that would, my goodness gracious, what that would do a great deal, not just for anyone's education, more quiet time, more time to ruminate. Cows are called ruminids. Why? Because they chew over and over and over and over. They chew over their material, their grass. And we ruminate on our ideas. We need that quiet time, and that's at war with this culture, which wants us to keep it on the treadmill there. But yes, that quiet time, to your point. And by the way, I think that would do a power of good for family dynamics too. If people could just chill out and back off, that would do a great deal. Just quiet, think, a few deep breaths. Yeah, so there we go. I would say that much.
I mean, I know this is a huge topic, because something I've noticed in our conversation now, and from a lot of the people I talk to, is if you're an out of the box thinker, an out of the box educator, even you have an out of the box service or system, you usually have to wear many hats, because you're paving the way for a new way to do things. And as you said, there's only you and one other there, and yet the ideals are huge as to I mean, taking the responsibility for re-education. And obviously you're not going to take a baby and educate it up. It's the parents' responsibility. And then
Although Rousseau sitting on my shelf there would be very happy to do so.
ah
Jean-Jacques Rousseau.
yeah,
That's the premise of Emile. That's the premise of Emile, as a baby's just dropped off and he raises it from 0 to 20.
This is a huge topic. I mean, I think it's the thing that most people, I mean, even as I'm getting into this with you and you're looking at what is education? What does a student need to learn? How does consciousness grow? What is awareness? And that, I mean, it does take, they say, a village to raise a child, as they say, a community. I mean, obviously, you can't sit and educate someone fully. You have the constraints of your daily life and the economics of it right now, and those sorts of things. But there's also the coming together, I'm finding, as you and I are chatting, and some of the other people, of maybe taking the long distance approach, as we're zooming right now, and using the effectiveness of that. Maybe people are being forced to be more distant, in because of, there's lots of reasons that we can talk about, why this whole nonsense and the viral garbage and all of this other stuff is being shoved in people's faces. True or not is a conversation for another day. But how can that be made to benefit, I would say, the student, as they expand in your hands and you're teaching them. I would love to talk a little bit more about some of the courses you offer, why you've chosen those courses, and how you see that expanding in the near to medium future.
Yes. So yeah, we specialize at present in the humanities, particularly the Western humanities, because that's my specialty. But we are making every effort with the resources available to branch out. And so specifically, and then I can double back to the mind behind this, Lorenzo. Specifically, the full-time enrollment is for three. Is not that one's committed to 3 years, but ideally, we'll say the full program. Let's say that is 3 years, and then it follows um, basically the ancient world, ancient Greece and the Orient. The Rome is the second semester. Third semester is medieval. Fourth semester, early modern. Fifth, 19th century, and then sixth is 20th century. It's not a perfect system. It's somewhat dated in terms of how we look at history, but it's a good backbone to build. In fact, as we're speaking here, I'm building out in different directions. So Dr. Das has specialty in the East, so we're looking at some specific courses on Hinduism and what else are we doing? Beowulf, and he's a specialist in languages. So that sort of thing. So it's this has always been the case. Do something small and then build off from that, and always to go ahead there with things. And I can illuminate that a bit more later. But what we do is we'll say, oh, you start off scratch. That would be ancient Greece, we'll say. So the history courses would be in sync with the literature. So if we were doing that semester, we'd be reading the Iliad and the Odyssey and the Republic and all of that sort of thing for that semester. So there's a synchronization, and I think that helps the student, towards your point about developing imagination and so forth, make those connections and larger apologetic for history, but put their little life and my little life and our little days in a larger historical perspective, and that can be greatly calming, let me tell you.
It's true.
So there's that, and then that quiet time would allow them to work on the project. So a lot of that nitty gritty classroom stuff, besides discussion in class, would be writing prompts and essays and working on that skill over however long they're with us for.
I mean, it sounds from historical perspective, a lot of it seems to be hero study. Not that you were looking for heroes, but how people have acted heroically, how they've made civilizations, how they've lost civilizations, how they've created. I mean, I can talk for myself. Like you said, if you put yourself in a historical perspective, you allow yourself maybe to gather with the flow of the movement of potential. I would guess when you see people if you look at modern heroes, they're all less than heroic, I'm going to say, what gets pushed on us, for lack of a better way to put it. And if you look at past heroes, again, I can talk about myself. When you see some of the people that were movers and shakers in planetary or civilization movers, those were very inspirational for me as using my imagination. If them, if them, why not me? I would look at one person. It always seemed to be one or two or three people that changed the course of everything through their own integrity and determination. When you are I kind of want to turn this around. When you're helping a student, let's say, and you have someone that's with you for 3 years or what have you, how do you personally, I don't want to use the word judge, but I guess I will have to there, judge their progress? How do you see, with the marks and the movements in their essays and things like that, how do you judge how they're learning and what they're learning and how to help them further along in their education?
Well, besides, just intuiting things from class discussions, which can, of course, reveal things. Also, the student would start with little writing prompts, basically descriptions and maybe a paragraph. And then at a certain point, then we move up to, little essays where they have to argue things. And so that's a good way to gauge their progress with a lot of with that development, or in other ways in the class, or depending on the age, because we've have had students from 15 to 50. So it's and I've had much younger in the beginning, like I was saying early on, but just in the Apocatastasis days, I think 14 or 15 was the youngest we had. But so it's gonna, you have to know their personality too. That's a big thing there. But yeah, to answer that, it would be the writing prompts would be the big one there. And that that involves them also kind of being a bit open about their flaws and where they're not getting things, and being able to gauge themselves and be open about that.
Excellent, excellent. I find, the whole, if we look at the bigger picture, like even coming to you and coming outside the box, and I recall you sharing some writing with us about modern society having to change, let's put it politely, before the education system could change, because they're a reflection of each other. And development you're doing with your students, are you finding as they go through your classes that you're helping with that?
That's a really interesting question. I should hope so. Certainly, that's certainly my hope. Towards your comment there about that idea of the state of society, as the years go by, you get a whole other dynamic on people in this sort of work. I should imagine you yourself, Lorenzo, with your organization and the new Agora and all that, and you have to obviously arrange interviews and whatnot. You realize there's a different side of things once you're organizing and you're dealing with people. And that's in particular, the past couple of years, something that's really impressed me with being around families and being with different students. And there's nothing of scorn in this. I can be a great one for scorn, but not this. The damage that this atomized society, whether that's addiction, depression, pharmaceutical use, bad, horrid sleep patterns all over the place. Reading and I'm talking, and there's nothing of the judgment here, but men in their 30s here and 20s, you can't read. I don't mean they literally can't read, but they come to me with great honesty, and they say things, they can't concentrate because of these telephones. And all things, I'm trying not to be specific here, and when I say this, I'm not speaking about any one person in particular. And this is a composite of problems that I'm mentioning, and that should be understood by everyone. And so there is that, and I find people are very much in need of that. I mean, and that's a larger comment on society, literally just someone to talk to and whatnot. So you realize the rot is a lot worse. The social dissolution is much, much worse than is intimated by Coast to Coast or Mr. Jones, or just a surface level analysis. And and even those of us with knowledge that is below the surface somewhat, there's whole battles going on that don't got to do with the Bilderberg group.
No, no. Like you mentioned our system, and it's amazing that I've been doing quite a bit of meditating on things, since we first chatted, and watching people and seeing who works with us, who hasn't, what we're building. I know we've talked about the new now Agora we're building, and I get calls all the time for people that just need to talk, that just need I'll call it man's talk, for lack of a better word. My wife calls women's talk is a certain way of looking at things, and man's talk is another way of looking. Like men have a different way of building to knowledge than women. I have found, it's been my experience. I don't want to pull any feathers here, but it still seems to be exactly true to me.
Agreed.
Yeah. And and I'll get calls from people at 2 or 3 in their morning, since I'm in Japan, so I'm in a different time zone, so it doesn't really bother me if it's 7 or 8 my evening. It's still 2 or 3 maybe your time, that sort of thing. And a lot of the people will just want to have a conversation with, let's say, an intelligent fellow. I'm not going to put myself up there, but someone that's not going to judge them, or not try and shove them back in the system, or not try and push them into what, as you mentioned, modern society just seems to be on an entertainment sort of beeping treadmill with the phones and what have you and all those other nonsense. And I found literally it's making people insane, I would think. And by insane I mean incoherent in being able to think and create, even dress themselves, without getting some input put in from the outside. And I can see you jumping around a lot with I mean, obviously your plate is huge when you bring people in and they want to be educated, and they're looking to, beyond, let's say, the facts of the historical system that you mentioned you're teaching. I mean, you're literally teaching people how to think for themselves. I would say, when you get the historical perspective. And it does take a community. I mean, a university has many teachers, obviously, and most modern public schools also have many teachers, one teaching math, one teaching history, etc., or humanities. And I'm not 100% sure where I'm going with this, only that I think from what I've seen and what you're doing, there's a whole bunch of men like us out there that are noticing something's wrong in the system, noticing people are pretty much uneducated in the ways of even understanding themselves. Like I said, 20 and 30-year-old men, they can't read. And, so they come into your system and they're plopped down in front of you, and you have to put on many hats, right? You're not just teaching the facts of history. Like you said, you also have to gauge the student. You have to see where they are. You have to see where they'd like to go. And you have to see even why they came to you in the first place, because you really don't know. Sometimes people are just lonely, right? Or sometimes people just need, like I said, an intelligent role model. How much do you find that that's the case? I would say with what has become, I would think that's even a key aspect of any education, is to see different role models and what's being offered to them. Not someone that's just opening up a textbook and going, okay, page 44, this is the answer. In what year did the Madam Smith sew red buttons on her shoes, for the historical perspective of of Connecticut or what have you. But more, I remember those facts and going, who cares?
Yes.
As in relation to the whys, like, why did Caesar do this? Let's say, why did do you find that comes up a lot? I'm going to go around to go like the whys. I used to get in trouble for asking why a lot. I remember that now. So I'm going to come back to that. And it's like, why did this happen? Why is this the case? So, why did this prime minister do this? Why is the president doing this? Why isn't this questioned? What do you think? Like, does that come up a lot in your class? I know it's a big question. And what do you feel about that particular question in the ways that can enhance education in general, and maybe address some of the challenges in society in specific?
Yes, I find that's a really interesting point of approach there. Yes, I find that does come up, and I find people want to ask that question, and I'm very happy to enter into that discussion with them. Often, I found that, and it's human nature what I'm about to say, and maybe a symptom of our particular generation. But people, they want the nitty gritty before they maybe understand the ABCs of a subject. They want to read some juicy occult manual in Latin, but they don't want to do their declensions, or they don't want to do their conjugations, that sort of thing, or whatnot. And that is, I mean, that I used to, when I was getting into some deeper areas of research and just comprehension in my 20s, I used to think that, why don't they get into these deep things in school? And we'd be undergrads and like, why did they teach us this stuff in high school? And one of the reasons is it's very difficult to give the devil his due and to give the mainstream its due, and to buttress this point that I've intimated to you privately in the essay, and then that you've mentioned, the state of society. Part of it is that it's most of the students most of the time aren't getting even the basics. They're not ready for those deeper whys. Of course, if it comes up, let's roll, let's rock and roll, let's go in there. But it's always good to get that foundational approach, and it's the slog work, it's the learning the chords on the guitar, it's the declensions, whatever your shimmy is. People, that slog is very unattractive to people, but very often that will help actually answer those whys if you understand the principles of an area. So it's very often, it's very often older students have this problem. I've noticed. Um, they look at a class as almost like, the tuning into a podcast or something. And, you can't do that when you're studying a language or whatnot. And, you can't miss 2 or 3 classes and then come back. So it's these type of habits, these kind of interpersonal habits that I find myself trying to prop up very often or trying to encourage. Because once those things are there, then, if the foundation is solid, the building can sit on top of it. Really juicy occulted knowledge is great, but if it's sitting on a foundation of sand, it's more dangerous than anything.
I mean, I would agree. I mean, I used to think I hated education and I hated learning. And then I realized, a little later in life that it wasn't. I love learning, right? I love education. I love the whys. It was the system that kind of crunched my whys and wouldn't allow me to look outside the box that I really hated. Maybe a lot of people are like it. I think as humans, naturally, especially as men, it's our lot in life to want to explore, to want to find more, to want to see what's behind the next door, over the hill. I mean, everyone likes adventure movies for that reason, or books or stories. And as you mentioned, that we've been taught that someone's going to hand you the answer, and you can sit on the couch, and then suddenly someone's going to fill up your bank account, and then life is done. You're successful and happy, and what do you do with that then? You could have a lot of money and you can't ask any questions why. And I've seen the saddest of people with the most amount of money, let's say, and some of the best people I've come across that are struggling more towards integrity than anything else, because for them that's most important. Historically speaking, do you touch upon, this is something that I've wanted to know, do you touch upon the personalities of the leaders? Does that something that gets shared with them? Do you touch upon this system in relation to more beyond what they've done, and to how come, those actions were, made?
Oh yes, absolutely. And you try to troubleshoot things, and that always with the history classes, you try to put the student as soon as the teacher in the reality that at the time, just like at our time, we don't know what's coming next. Right. It's easy, if you're looking back at Caesar, hey, the time of recording this, hey Caesar, watch out, it's the Ides of March. Don't go in there. Don't you know? And Brutus and Cassius, and watch out, man. But they don't know that. So on so many levels, there's this retraining how the student and the teacher approach knowledge, right? You always have to check yourself and put yourself back there, or yeah, indeed, to look at those personality traits. We tend to use. I like using it. We'll see where we go in the years ahead. But I like this series, The Story of Civilization. This was a series, it ran with, Britannica and the Great Book series. It's very classically mid 20th century, where people would have these giant collections of books that they would never read, but they were kind of status symbols like a piano or whatever. And so it's mid 20th century. Is it the most cutting edge? No, but it does. It's written by Will and Ariel Durant. It took about 40 years to spit the whole thing out. But no, because Will Durant was trained in the 19th century, which was very much great man history, he does tend to get into that. So it allows that type of jumping off point, or he brings it up. He's trying to cover everything in history, so it's done on a somewhat superficial level. But at least in the live classes, allows us to go in that direction, and sometimes that's where we go.
And that's very interesting. I mean, even yesterday, it was funny that it was the recycling around here, where people get rid of their books and things like that. And I saw several examples of these big stacks of encyclopedias, people getting rid of them. And I've seen some old houses I've been in, especially in Japan, where the history goes back a lot further. So you see these old encyclopedia sets, and I want to take them all home, right? I mean, obviously it's almost impossible, collect the old And what I'm really getting at in that is, like, once you're taught, I found to be a thinker, critical or otherwise, if you look at the system, like what you point to behind you, I mean, there may be some errors in the way it's approached, so to speak, but if you're a critical thinker, it's more the experience of seeing how people have presented history, seeing what's shared, seeing what's offered, and allowing yourself to question that, because maybe it's true, maybe it's not, maybe this happened, maybe it didn't, but it gives you an opportunity, I think, to get a picture or a vision of a certain historical perspective. I mean, none of us were there, obviously, so all we have is a lot of secondhand factual knowledge. I mean, we weren't there with Caesar with the Ides of March. We have some ideas passed down to along, and probably even if you study the time period, different people will have different perspectives on why, what, and how, and where it went. But I think this is, I'm finding even as I'm talking to you, the topic and the bottom of this conversation seems to be getting bigger and bigger and harder to grasp, because what is education? What is a person? Where do you go with what what can you create? Maybe it's just kind of a system where I think you get to know your teacher, you get to understand where they came from, you get to understand why they're teaching what they're teaching. And I would say, even again, going back to a couple of teachers I liked, we became as much friends as we could when I was a high school student, and they were in their 40s at the time, and I guess I was, what, 15, 16 or 14, so you can kind of become friends, but it felt more like something I was looking to, I wouldn't say a father figure exactly, but I could say a community mentor, someone you could just trust and be honest with, and share with. I find that that's what's sorely lacking in modern teachers, in that I'm up here and I'm giving you that, and you give me these answers and you're okay, and you give me those answers and you're not. So I would like to, maybe this isn't a question, but I would just like to thank you personally for allowing that sort of a system in the best way that you can, with only two of you running an entire post-secondary, and I guess secondary, depending on and who's joining you, sort of class. And I would like to invite our viewers, something that I found, and I would love to get John's feedback on this, in that in many ways what we are offering here at the New Now Agora, and again, why I was attracted to John, it's kind of a university system, if you like. It's kind of a teaching system. I mean, we go into all kinds of topics, and we want to look at all kinds of ways that we can help our viewers be happy, healthy, free, and wise, and most all to stand on their integrity, and to be able to allow them to grow in the ways that they would like to grow, without telling, but sharing the ability to, become critical thinkers, critical leaders in their, local community, and to become maybe the men and women that they've always dreamed is possible for them. I mean, I would say in some ways, you found a system like I, you found a system that needed enhancing, from your own perspective, and then you stuck with it, and we could probably both say, there's not generally a lot of riches that come with it. There's always the challenges, and more work than money generally comes when you go outside the system to do, a job. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can go on the school's website. You scroll back 6-7 years, you see me in the woods giving lectures, and there's nobody there. And that's not because I wasn't going around town, but it was a long time. It may yet be a long time, a long old road to hoe. But I mean, you really start when you've structured things in such a way that has no connection to the legal system, such as Apocatastasis. When it's so countercultural, you realize, you really start feeling mad after a while, and nobody's responding, and all the people who say they know what's going on, they're not doing anything. And it was some weird years there, but you just have to keep going ahead. One of the, again, there was no eureka moment, but the vision Lorenzo has sharpened over the years. The school, I started it on the Christian feast day of commemoration of Holy Saturday, which is the day which precedes Easter, for obvious, say, mythological connections, or connections of meaning in that religion, of back from the dead, and likening education to that. But also, less well known, on Monday of 1916, there was a tremendous rebellion in Ireland. And the essay, "The Murder Machine," is one by Patrick Pearse, uh, published 1912, 4 years before that event, is one that I would very much recommend yourself and your viewers. But as regards the work of Apocatastasis and the problem, and what you've a number of times um, marveled at, is the profundity of education, as we've chatted here. And I've had that reaction from people in years gone by. Once we get talking, people realize that education is certainly a touchstone towards the reason we're all going into captivity at this moment. Um, and the there's almost no area of the problem, however defined, that doesn't connect somehow to education, from the personal to the social. And I would say that one of the, to put the mind of the school in a nutshell, what would be a successful education? It would be a man and a community of men, a town, a province, whatever, that had their affairs so in order, that were given such a spirit in their education that they would be able to, not that they would do it, but that if wise men counseled, they would be able to react in an organized fashion, even in physical force. That a man who can assert his will, which doesn't have to be physical, but in a situation has the wherewithal, economically, mentally, personally, interpersonally, and a community of men that feels that they are being tyrannized, if it is prudent, which is a decision for those men in those times and climes, but that the potential always exists for neighborhoods and larger to react against outsiders and to shove back the tyranny.
Yes.
That is the education which has reached its full fruit, and that an education that produces supine men is not an education.
No, I mean, I see a light in your eyes that I feel, pardon me, that I haven't seen since the beginning of this talk, in a way that that comes from a lot of the men I talk to. It's really interesting. I'm doing another series with a fellow that has a autodidactic, which is self-teaching. He's got a video series, and we're talking about what is it to be a man? What does it mean to be a man in society? And, you know, the thing that always comes up, and I love the different ways. It's like somebody might hold a sword, but, you know, it's also an education system where you have your own internal integrity. And you're right. I couldn't agree with you more in that, you know, to have a community of support of intelligent folks that won't allow the monsters in, you know, whether they're economic monsters or philosophical monsters or political monsters or whatever, you know, they could be real monsters. Something that I think this is cuts to the heart of all men, in my opinion, all real men. You know, they don't want the supine idea of being alive. They do want to be able to stand up and go, you know, this far and no further. You know, this is my community, this is my family, this is my neighbor, you know, these are my friends, and this is what we require for a happy, healthy, and free life. And, you know, part of that, a huge part of that, and like I said, I think we've touched on a topic that we could have 100 conversations for. I've made like 20 notes about, let's talk about philosophy, let's talk about imagination.
We may yet have those 100 conversations.
Yeah, let's talk about politics, you know, let's talk about the monetary system, you know, let's talk about humanities, you know, in relation to what gets taught and what's possible, right? So, you know, we've touched on a very, like maybe 1%, I would think, in this conversation. And I think both of us want to expand into, you know, something that could go on all night for you, and I guess all day for me at the moment of cutting back to the heart of the matter, in that, you know, if you stand for something and you have an inner core of metal, you know, and I don't mean TA, I mean DD, metal, and your spine is strong, and you have a background of which to rely on in relation to it being authentically helpful and moral. I'm going to say, you know, moral, you know, go back to it. You mentioned the Christianity, and I think personally that's why it's attacked these days quite a bit more than other religions, is its moral standing. You know, I don't follow any major religion, but I think that one does have at its core a good morality, and then you can't be moved. Right? You know, it doesn't matter what a government says, doesn't matter what a tax collector says, doesn't matter what a rule or law or your neighbor or your next, you know, or someone says. It gives you the ability to stand strong in relation to what you would like to make and bring into this reality. And, you know, I find, you know, what I love about talking with you, John, is you seem to be a pillar in that community. So when you say, I'm going to go back to luminaries again, I mean, finding someone with integrity is rare as hen's teeth these days. if or even finding someone with integrity then that will stand on it no matter what, even if their money is challenged, even if their job is challenged, even if their physical location is challenged, maybe their relationship is challenged, whatever. Could be with them, could be with a wife or a husband or their children. I mean, I've talked with people whose children won't talk to them because of the virus that may or may not be real, even though they're scientists and studies, and they're going, are you kidding me? This is the way this is. But the education system is such that it's inculcated literally into them in a way that's not healthy. So I maybe we'll have to wrap this up and maybe move towards something else. But what do you feel about that? Like your system is one pillar I would find in helping people become intelligent, right? Helping people even to to gather a system of critical thinking, which obviously any real man would need in order to be able to be a pillar in their society, I would feel. So what do you think about what I just said?
Can you rephrase that, Lorenzo?
Okay, well, let me put it this way, is that to be a real man requires an intelligent consideration on what's going on in your environment, right? To be able to stand up and face the monsters requires you understanding, I would find, what the challenges really are. Let's put it that way. So in order to understand what a challenge is, you have to understand, where they're coming from, how you were educated, how you were brought up, and who you are, and how you became who you are even. And the education system, obviously, I mean, from the time we're like 3 or 4 or 5, especially, you're thrown into a system where, you're educated not by your parents, but by other people, throughout your formative years. And, to have teachers of integrity is essential, I guess, to make the man and to make the woman is what I mean. And from there, you can, envision a society where you have strong, and by strong, I mean people of moral standing to, allow to understand the history and etc. and to grow from there.
I see. Yes, that role model or that person to imprint off of, very important. I think you mentioned people in your own life, and I'm sure we all are getting people in our youth that were similar people. There is a dynamic here that I think about from time to time. Teaching tends to attract very idealistic people. And what you find is people will go into these systems, public school or private school and homeschool. And I've been trying to take the discussion, not our discussion, but when I comment on these things, just to gently point out that private school and homeschool are public school. It's the exact same model. It doesn't matter, people, what's being taught in class. That is not the primary model. I exaggerate. But the damage of modern pedagogy is not in the material that's being taught. I will say that much. It is, I argue, in the structure of the school day and the psychology, which is just as present in private school and homeschool. In fact, in certain ways, it may be even more present. That's another discussion. I'll tease you out for another one of these conversations. But regarding the point about you have very idealistic people and capable people that enter education, but what you find is, frankly, something of a defeatist attitude, which I referenced in a different context with the homeschoolers I've come across, which is an appraisal of society and a rather grim appraisal at that, which leads to the conclusion for the group I've spoken about before, the homeschoolers. It leads to the conclusion that the best of them, their social consciousness is, I got to protect my family. I just got to raise my family. And that's it. It's a very, in my opinion, a very myopic way, and pretty much just as useless as the mainstream system. When that comes to teachers, what you end up finding is people in these systems, public school, private school, even these tutoring things, that they have the mindset, well, if I can just reach one student, if I can just change the life of one student, and that on one level is an endearing thing and to be commended, but it's also the mindset of defeat. It's also the mindset of defeat. And it brings up that idea of the in other contexts, the accelerationist, or it may be the situation may be such that people who see the problem with education, I'm speaking to teachers here in particular, um, may be prolonging the pain of the system by staying in it. It's my inclination to, it's a battle on all fronts, and you're doing great in public school, keep it up, man. You're doing great in private school, keep it up. It may, however, be just drawing out the system and the pain longer. So those noble characters, to your theme here, my counsel is, if it's something that's appropriate to your state in life, that is, if you don't have a family and you have the backbone for it, you may wish to hack it alone. That may be more a successful route in the long run, rather than, forgive me, a somewhat defeated mindset of, well, if I can just reach one kid this year, my job will be done. You got to think like a hero if you're going to go on with that language, and that's you're taking it all. I'm going to reach every kid, and we're going to do it. And that would be my point to your question, Lorenzo.
I love it. I love it. I think we've touched on so much here, and I can see, like, the pathways of discussion opening, in that you do have to go your own way. John has gone his own way. A lot of the people that I talk with, especially here on the New Now, every conversation I've actually had, as I'm considering right now, are people that have seen the system. They don't want to change the system from inside. Another way of paraphrasing perhaps what John has said is, if you want to change a system, propose a new one. And you have to be, like you said, reaching one student inside a system, or maybe saving one person inside an economic modality, is not going to change anything, right? You have to take on the hero's role, all or nothing, so to speak, and move forward in what you would like to do and what your passion is. I think we all have that, in my opinion. John wants to be an educator. I like bringing people together in what I'm doing, sharing with them, their heart and their feelings and what they like to grow with. And, I want to invite John back. I would like, whoever's watching this, perhaps there's a whole bunch of questions, as I have written down, that are going to come through to you in relation to this. John has discussed joining us further, maybe on a regular basis, down the road, where we can have, like I said, more interactions, maybe some personal questions. Maybe there's something specific that wants to get asked and that can get asked, and you can find out not only how he can support you, but how you can support him, because it does have to be a two-way street. As you said, a lot of people don't want to put the effort and the resources, as you said, what's get valued into a system. And I can't think of something that's more valuable than critical thinking, and to get an honest education as to how you can, you are the creator of your own life. So, knowing how you work is super important. Perhaps the most important thing. People will go out and spend $10,000 on a Caribbean vacation, or maybe when they were allowed to go at the time, that, they would. But if you say, well, this is an education system, and this fellow's going to put in 3 days a week for the next 52 weeks or 28 weeks or however long, and it's going to cost you $10,000, a lot of people are going to go, are you kidding me? Or, they might balk at that. Whereas, a perspective on what's really valuable is what's required to make a better life, I would say. And, any closing statements perhaps you'd like to add to this conversation, where we've been all over the place, but I think we've stuck to the bottom, in my opinion, of what your university, I'll call it that, or your post-secondary, or maybe your alternative educational services can provide, is not only a mentor such as yourself, but also a way to develop some critical thinking, ideas.
I would say to always to go ahead, if you have the mind to do it, to go ahead with a project, whether that's New Agora or Apocatastasis. And when you're doing that, you will learn many lessons. You'll learn mundane lessons, like I've learned in the past couple of years, about exchange rates and time zones and all of the nitty gritty that I never ever imagined that I would learn, including video broadcasting. And then you'll learn bigger lessons, which are sometimes very difficult lessons, such as, and it took me probably a decade, when all was said and done, to come to the hard fact that most of the people who see the problem, say in education and 1,000 other ways, they're not going to act on it. They know every little nitty gritty conspiracy. They know who was here, when, why. They know this great book. They read Tragedy and Hope, or at least they have it like sitting on their shelf, like all the other books they don't read. But they watch, 10,000 conspiracy videos every day, every podcast by every guru that comes up. They got it. And that's commendable. But what is not commendable, and is anyone who is going to implement this, and you may yet see this in your own stuff, Lorenzo, I certainly have in mind, is you're going to see a lot of the people you assumed we were all on the same team. Not that they're against you, but they're not going to act. They're just going to sit around and complain all day. And you have to be ready, whether it's in the education world or in others, to realize that and just keep going ahead. If you want to use that mythology from the Easter Rising, Patrick Pearse, who wrote that, went on to lead that rising a few years later, the Murder Machine essay. He was a pedagogue himself, a teacher. So using that example from history or even mythology, if I may, I would say that always go ahead with the plan, but be aware that, hey guys, let's charge. And you may be the only guy that's going forward and that will pick its charge there, but it's still worthwhile, because the victory is not to defeat the enemy. We keep going back to the warfare analogy, but the powers that be seem to like that, so we'll play ball. That is not the victory. Is to drive back the agenda. The victory is to assert the truth. The victory is to assert the pushback against the agenda. And that is a very different paradigm, as opposed to, frankly, a very British model of warfare. And what victory means is, destroying your opponent culturally or whatever. No, it is not to be dominated by the system and to be able to assert yourself against the system, even if you're the last sandcastle that's about to be overtaken by the wave. You were still the last sandcastle there, and therein was the victory.
I would agree. And I'll add one little bit in that if you do forge forward and you do follow the advice that was just passed along by John, you do end up meeting people that help you. It may not be in your neck of the woods. It may not be in your country. There may be someone you didn't know was going to happen. But I found personally, as we've done what he's said, forge forward, beans for years at a time, just to stand in my own integrity. Yeah, he knows what he's teaching in the woods, which sounds nice to me. Would have rather some of my courses were actually
wasn't too bad.
I think would have enjoyed that more than a classroom at the back in the day. But eventually, even if it looks like you're alone, you'll find some. It might not be millions, but you'll find 10, 20, 30. We're building it and they are coming. As that movie said. And I want to give my heartfelt thanks to John. I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate the man you are more than anything, to be honest. Not that I don't value what you're sharing as well in an educational system. And once again, you are one of those luminaries. I trust my feelings and my intuition and my integrity. And if you grow your own, you could say grow a pair if you wanted to be rude with the time, but if you grow your own integrity, you'll meet other men and women that also have their integrity intact or are looking to increase it. And who doesn't want those kind of people in their life beside them, watching their back, helping them along, whether it's education or food or parenting or whatever, self-sustaining growth technologies, really doesn't matter. Someone's in it because they want to help the world authentically and they have an integrity for society and humanity, well then, they're worth supporting, in my opinion. And what we're going to do here, well, did you want to say something? Sorry.
Just thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a lot of fun chatting with you, Lorenzo, and I hope to do it down the line.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. We're going to leave some links below. I'm going to ask John for some links for, the what did you say? The monster machine? What was that one?
The murder machine.
The murder machines, unschooling. I'd like to get a link to the historical civilization books he's got back there. Perhaps it sounds interesting. And I'll leave a link to John's school, and we'll leave a bio for you guys to do some more research. And once again, questions, suggestions, leave them below. For myself or John, I'll pass them along. And thank you so much for joining us. I fully enjoyed this conversation. I love when they go.
Thanks, Lorenzo.
Okay, thanks everyone. We'll see you again soon.
Can't make me lie to my heart. No one tells me where I should start. Freedom.